Well, this is Friday of Easter week, but I thought I would do um, just kind of a visual essay on the ethos of the community, the Episcopal community, and our liturgy. I was thinking about this because I sit here and do the liturgy, but in the traditional sense in the church, morning prayer was done with standing and sitting and kneeling, praying through kneeling. In the church I grew up in, which was many years ago now, you stood to sing, and you knelt to pray, and you sat to listen. It's different in other denominations. It seems like in the Methodist Church, I went to a Methodist seminary, they sit for pretty much everything. Now we've loosened things up a bit, and you can stand or kneel for prayer. For those of us who have weak knees, that's a good thing. And it isn't quite as rigid as it was when I was growing up. Everybody did the same thing. Now you see people standing and people kneeling, and that variability is a good thing. The prayer book, this prayer book, you can see this one's pretty well used. This went through a long period of evolution until it was created, and then it was created at a time where it didn't use inclusive language, and so the patriarchal and male-dominated language was still very much a part of this. You can see that I've marked this one up in a way to kind of deal with some of the patriarchal language. I try to be inclusive when I can. One of the easy ways of doing that is to address those that are addressed to the Lord. I address it to you, meaning God, and that kind of eliminates at least some of those masculine gender nouns that we use to describe God. Well, that's just one of the issues. This was issued, 79 was a little early before that. And of course, along with the 79 prayer book also came the ordination of women, which happened in the 1970s with the original group of 7 who were ordained in Philadelphia, and I believe that was 74 or 73, I can't remember. I know a little bit about it because Bishop Wells, who was from West Missouri, where Kansas City is, he participated as one of the 3 bishops who ordained. It was a great occasion, but it was also a occasion that was going against the ruling of the church, and it took the church a little time to accept women's ordination, but by 79 it was accepted. It's been a good thing for us. Lots of good things happened to us. We've been nationally going through the Me Too movement, but it really began with the ordination of women. They began to look at the masculine practices of the church and the misogyny that was part of the church and still is probably, and began to sandpaper that down. It's a good thing. Yeah, a wonderful thing, actually. There are many joys from having women's ordination, but that is certainly one of the important ones, at least officially. It changed the role of bishops, reminded us that they have a judicial function as well, and so errant priests are dealt with rather than being allowed to sort of go on and on. All of this is good. I want to talk a little bit about the ethos of the community. Ethos is, I think of it as a glue that holds together. Our most sacred book is this one, the Book of Common Prayer. So when you change the Book of Common Prayer, that's when people get upset and fight about it. The change, 79 book was a big change. Prior to that, there were the original prayer book was in 1549, and then there was another one in 1552. The 1549 one was a kind of Catholic, very Catholic in its orientation toward Orthodox, almost Roman Catholic. The 1552 was a Protestant version of that, and most prayer book reform for a long time was going between those two, back and forth. But in 79, we went an entirely different direction. First of all, we kept the Elizabethan language as Rite 1, but we added contemporary language. As a parishioner pointed out to me, well, that means you're going to have to do the book pretty often because contemporary language changes all the time, which is true. So far, we haven't changed it. It was 1979. The one before that was 1928. Before that was 1893. And then before that, the first American prayer book was in 1789. Now, the background of that is that Bishop Seabury was ordained by the non-juring bishops of Scotland. Nobody, when he went over to be ordained, nobody would ordain him. It was after the Revolution, and we weren't in real favor. And so he finally found these bishops. And they're called non-juring because they weren't really in perfect communion with the church at the time. We've had other non-juring kinds of circumstances. There were bishops, for instance, who refused to ordain women. When we first decided to ordain women, that is now passed, but those bishops were still in community, but they didn't have to, they weren't required to ordain women. Now, all bishops are required to ordain women, and of course we have women bishops. We have fully embraced that reality. But the ethos, the glue that holds us together, is quite different in various different communities. I've watched over the years Roman Catholic priests who have been received into the Episcopal Church, and they often find that the authority in the Episcopal Church is quite different. While we look like a Roman church, we look like a hierarchical church, we are not as much as you would think. And so that sort of Catholic sacerdotal priestly authority is just not really there. You know, priests are sort of first among equals, and we can operate by persuasion, not so much by authority. Whereas in the Roman Church, the priest has pretty profound authority over all kinds of things. And of course, our priests have authority too, but that is mostly shared with the laity of the community in a much more positive way, I think, from my point of view. It isn't sort of from the top down. And I often find that those Roman Catholic priests who have been received, interesting, Episcopal priests are reordained by the Roman Church, but we don't reordain them. We consider their ordination valid, and so we just receive them into the also a sense of authority. But what's most important for us is freedom. the freedom to choose. If you read particularly Paul's letter to the Ephesians, you realize there's a lot of freedom if you take Paul quite literally at what he's saying. In Roman church, they don't do that so much. They have a magisterium, and they have teachings, and they have all kinds of boundaries that they put on people. But we say, you have to pretty much figure out what the ethos of your own life is, what the authority in your own life is. And different rules apply to different realities. You cannot really make rules that both help Bishop Tutu in South Africa when he's mostly in the United States now, but you also have somebody like George H.W. Bush, who was president of the United States for a while. The same rules won't work, and specific rules like no drinking, no dancing, no smoking, those things, while probably a good idea, really aren't very helpful in terms of one's righteousness, because the reality is that you have to figure out in your own life what is right and what is wrong. Righteousness for each person is different, and so we recognize that in the Anglican Church, and we have the church as a place for discussion of those kinds of things. But we're not saying, you over there, you need to do this, this is this. It just isn't the authority. You can see that this is also different than the evangelical churches, which have a very specific sense of what the rules are. And well, we do have rules. The Ten Commandments are rules that we are invited to follow, but we don't get much more specific than that. We do have canon law and some other things, but in general, the highest value for Anglicans is the freedom to sort out what the righteousness is for your life. And that's why the variability in the church community is quite wide. Although we aren't a very big church, we were the church for a long time of the sort of the ruling class. That's changed as well. We are just a different church than we were even in my lifetime. Well, these are things that are not, these are more, you get a sense of them, but it's not easy to define. So, I'm hoping this is helpful. Anyway, trying to explain it, trying to articulate these things. Thank you for listening.